Hi, I'm Quentin.
And I'm Michael.
And this is Prospects for Success podcast, where we bring you our thoughts on Prospect League baseball.
News, notes, opinions, and our favorite happenings.
Thanks for joining us for Season 2, Episode 1.
All right, so Season 2, getting ready to get underway. We are still in the off season. As we're recording this, there's about 10 weeks left until the beginning of the 2023 Prospect League season. But we need to kind of go back and wrap up a few things from last year. So we decided to start our new podcast episodes a little early during a time that in baseball terminology is called the hot stove season. Well, we might talk a little bit more about what that means here in a little bit. But we need to talk a little bit more about what happened at the end and what's happened since the end of last season. And probably the biggest thing is going to be what an amazing the entire playoffs were, how amazing the entire playoffs were, but also just how amazing that final series was between the River Dragons and the Paints.
Yeah, especially Game 1, where the Paints went on the road to face and went down there, faced Alton, ended up beating them 5-3 in Game 1. In Game 2, Alton had to come down to Chillicothe. Chillicothe weren't really all that hot. I mean, they only lost 2-0, but the Paints just couldn't get the bats moving at all in that second game. Game 3, I mean, it was a slow start to the Game 3 as well. I mean, the Paints still couldn't. Their pitching was actually pretty good. They had a really good starting pitcher in for the final game of the series. Again, Alton came out strong with pitching as well. They actually did end up taking the lead until the 6th inning, I'd say. But the Paints at the end just came out on top as the champions, 14-4.
Yeah, it was. I got to tell you, I mean, was it the best baseball that I've ever seen played? No, not by a long shot. Was it the best playoff series I've ever seen? I got to tell you, this was one of the best, most stressful, most entertaining, most competitive playoff championships that I have ever seen. I mean, how many times has a Prospect League team won a game scoring 2 runs? Okay, that just, you don't win in the Prospect League scoring 2 runs. But I mean, Alton had, they shut the Paints out for, what was it, like 15 straight innings or something like that during that series. Chillicothe won. They managed to win the first game 5-3, which was just turned out to be absolutely huge, because they came back to Chillicothe and you know, like you mentioned, Alton won that game, that middle game back in Chillicothe, 2-0. The Paints barely got any hits. They had nothing going, and they really had nothing going for the first 5 innings or so of the next game back in Chillicothe, where they just weren't scoring runs at all, weren't getting on base. You mentioned Chillicothe's great starting pitching in that third game, though, which is really interesting that you mentioned that, because their starter in that game was Nick Lolithan, who had not started a game all year. But I'll give him the award. He was the best relief pitcher in the league. I mean, there were some really good relief pitchers in the league, but Nick was the best. But he was kind of about all that they had left. Both teams were down to a point where it was, they were scrambling. I mean, both teams were scrambling to just get a team out there. And so both teams were working with lineups that they had never used before. Chillicothe had, they were kind of out of infielders. And so, who was playing shortstop for them in that final series?
Tim Orr actually played shortstop in that series.
Yeah, and up until then, he had been, he'd played like some catcher, some first base, some DH, some outfield. So I mean, this was not a shortstop. This was not their regular season shortstop who was out there playing shortstop in that series. And really, for me, I thought, it just came down to finally Chillicothe made the series last long enough that Alton just kind of ran out of pitching. The pitchers that they had to lean on in the last few innings of that game, of that third game, they had some success during the year, but it wasn't necessarily in some really high leverage situations. I went back. I know both of us have gone back and watched all or parts of that series just because of how freaking entertaining it was, and being able to go back and watch it again. In another episode of this kind of hot stove part, we're gonna talk about some of the MLB rule changes and what we think of some of those and what we think should be applied. If there was a pitch clock in that third game, it would not have mattered. Especially the Alton pitchers, just because of how much stress there was, how much pressure there was. They were getting the ball and throwing it. I mean, there was a lot of nervous energy going on there. Pitchers were not taking a breath. They were not like walking around the mound to collect themselves. It was throw a pitch, get the ball back from the catcher, get right back on the pitching rubber, throw another pitch. I mean, it was like 4 or 5 seconds between pitches, which is crazy. But for them to, for that series to go like it did, and then once the Chillicothe bats started coming around, they actually run ruled them in that third game.
Yeah, I mean, they did run rule the Alton River Dragons, but you got to give some credit to the Alton River Dragons. There's second season into the Prospect League. I mean, they had a lot of pressure going into it just because, it's Chillicothe, and Chillicothe, I think, won before. So, just going into it, Paints winning back-to-back. They knew what they were up against, and, I mean, they came out pretty strong in the second game. But, honestly, I mean, I'm just giving Alton some credit because just going into that, your second season, and just going into the finals, almost coming out with a win over the Chillicothe Paints, you had me speechless.
They faced, in their playoff run, they faced what was a pretty hot Springfield Lucky Horseshoes team. They kind of caught fire at the right time, but they had to go to Alton to play. And so Alton won that game. I think it was 4-1 for that game. And then they got Quincy, which was a surprise to me all the way around because I thought Danville was going to win the West. And, Danville ended up, they lost to Quincy in that first round game. So I thought, well, if Quincy's winning that one, they're going to win everything. No. Alton ends up winning an amazing game. They take down Quincy 8-7 just to get the right to even play in that final championship series. And you're right. Alton just played some incredible baseball to get there. And again, we're going to talk in another episode later on, during this hot stove portion about, have you ever seen do you remember a team ever announcing as many players either coming back or who have already committed to play in the 2023 season as Alton has right now?
No, I have not. I mean, when the season first ended, you got maybe 4 or 5 players from Alton saying, oh yeah, I'm going to come back in the next season. But the thing is with that, you can't really say that after the season ends because you still got so many more months and, later on you might be like, oh, this isn't the team I want to play for. I want to play college ball in a different college. And maybe you got like stuff at home that you can't play baseball and, you can't really say that. But after they kind of re-signed old players, they went on a roll signing maybe like 10 new players at least. Like 4 of them were pitchers. They didn't seem all that bad. But I mean, that's a lot of pitchers just for Alton.
Yeah, we'll see how many of those players that have said that they're going to play for Alton this coming summer. We'll see how many of them actually do show up. Alton's on a mission. All right, they were that close to a championship, and I think that has made them really hungry to take that kind of that last step and win it. But let's get back to the that championship series for Chillicothe, because things were going so bad for so many innings, and in a championship, innings feel like games because of how much higher the pressure is. What do you think? What if you had to look at something and say, okay, this was the turning point. This was the thing that made that series turn around for Chillicothe to kind of take the momentum back and win that last game and win the championship. What was the real what did you see was being the real turning point there?
Probably Alton's pitching. I mean, after their starters, they had a starter in the second game that was really good. That's where they had that shutout. But in the third game, their pitching, their starter was decent. I'm not going to lie. Their starter was pretty decent.
Great starting pitching for them in all 3 games.
But their backups were not the best. And they had to put Eric Brockmeyer in to pitch.
Yeah, Brockmeyer had pitched some during the season. And he had done fine. He had done okay. But, yeah, you're right. When Brockmeyer came in to pitch, did his thing, a couple other guys came in to pitch, and suddenly, the radar, because Chillicothe Stadium, VA Memorial Stadium, there's a radar gun in the outfield. And, you see the first guy that's out there, and he's throwing mid 80s, and you're seeing that turn into some struggles with the bats. But then you're seeing some guys come in that are throwing, they're throwing low 70s or they're throwing mid 60s for some of their pitches. And you're right. You're absolutely right about the getting deep into the bullpen being a big change. But I'm going to tell you, if I had to put it on one play, what made Chillicothe finally turn around or kind of wake up and say, look, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this now. If I had to put it on one play, it's going to be on their defense. Fly ball to right center field. Santrell Farmer and Cade Root collide going after a ball. Nobody knew what happened until Santrell Farmer reaches into his glove and holds the ball up in the air. It was like something out of a movie. Nobody knew. Did he catch it? Was he conscious? I mean, he wasn't even moving for the first, it seemed like 30 seconds that he hadn't even moved. Cade Root's he was a big boy. And so when they collided, everybody was like, oh no. And then Santrell Farmer holds that ball up in the air and everybody's like, yeah. When he made that catch and they were able to kind of scoop him up and everybody ran in off the field, that was it. That was when Chillicothe kind of flipped the switch and started turning everything back around and made sure that they cinched it up. Got Jackson White a championship. That was actually pretty nice that that Jackson got to get a win as the head coach, as the field manager for the Paints. He has announced that he's not coming back next year, at least not yet. Things can always change, but nice to see him get that championship. Our guy Brett Carson with the walk-off hit, just couldn't have been a nicer guy to have that happen to. He actually he struggled with some injuries during the season. And, a lot of times somebody has an injury, they kind of shut it down. They want to get ready and get ready to go back for their college season. Give Brett some credit for this. I mean, it was an injury. It wasn't a terrible injury, but it was an arm injury, I believe, if I remember right. And after he rested it, rehabbed it a little bit, when he was ready to play, he actually came back, and that turned out to be huge because he played a gigantic role in that final series and just getting the hit. And I can't get away from the heart part of the game over the head and the feet and hands part of the game. We were sitting on the third base bleachers, and Brett Carson's mom and dad were sitting on the third base bleachers behind us when he got that hit. And as happy as we were for that team and for him and for they were absolutely beside themselves to see that happen. I can't imagine what that's like to have a situation like that and to be there when something like that happens. Just a fantastic time. Being able to win a trophy like that at home is pretty huge, pretty cool. Like I said at the beginning of this, for drama, for excitement, and for just out and out fun, I would put that playoff series up against just about any playoff series I have seen in sports.
Yeah, I mean, the playoff series was good. There's a lot of hype to it. I mean, you got to give some credit to the pitchers of all, and I mean, to me, I don't think some of those pitchers knew that they were even going to be able to play. But the biggest upset in the whole playoffs to me was the Illinois Valley Pistol Shrimp and the Danville Dans. Danville was number 1 seed the whole entire season.
Yeah.
They didn't fall off. I mean, yeah, the Pistol Shrimp kind of caught up to them at the end, but it wasn't enough. But here's the thing that made that game kind of turning point for Illinois. The Danville Dans had a catcher that was injured in that game. He had a hand injury, his throwing hand. Pistol Shrimp saw that as a sign of, okay, so we can steal. They had at least 7-8 steals in that game, but they had 6-7 errors in that whole entire game. But they ended up winning 11-10, and that was just a crazy game because I didn't expect Danville to lose. I thought they were gonna, beat Illinois, have an upset win against Chillicothe, maybe play against Alton and win. Because their coaching is really good. Their coaching staff has been really good over the couple years. Their pitchers were really on. They were throwing heat. I mean, I saw them play against Chillicothe, and they seemed pretty good. But they just kind of couldn't pull it together because their catcher just couldn't throw the ball because of his injury. And when he was at bat, he kind of like was, when you swing the bat, it's kind of like you have a really heavy hammer, and like it was just weighing him down, and he couldn't swing the bat at all. So that's what I feel like Danville lost, is because of that. But I can't really, it takes a whole team to lose. I'm not gonna blame it on the catcher.
Right, and you got to give a lot of credit to Illinois Valley for that game too. And that's the thing about the way the playoffs are set up in this league. You've got this 10-week season, and at the beginning of the playoffs, it's one game to move on. So you've got to play good ball for that one game, and Danville played good ball in that game. But Illinois Valley, just a scrappy team. And come on, I mean, you got to love a team that goes by the name the Pistol Shrimp, right? I mean, that's
great team. I mean, they did surprise me, and then they went on and faced Chillicothe in that championship of the conference, and they ended up losing 7-4.
7-4, yeah, for that game.
And it was at Illinois Valley, and these two teams have played each other before. They had played each other before in the regular season, and they played each other the last season, and they kind of knew what they were up against Chillicothe. Chillicothe's been a pretty good team the past couple of years, so.
All right, so 2022 was a fantastic season. It's going to be a hard act to follow. When we come back for episode 2, we will talk a little bit more about how the Prospect League is going to look a little different next year. Some new teams, some familiar faces will be back, but then also a familiar team that we will not get to see in 2023. So we'll talk a little bit more about how the league is going to change with the teams and the divisions in episode 2 coming up later on. Thanks for listening to the Prospects for Success podcast.